Uh, The reason we record this is in case you have to miss a session, you can catch up by watching the recorded session. And also, if there's something you want to look back on and revisit, you can go back to that point in the recording. You'll have access to those in the learning management system, which I'll take you through shortly. Also pop up a content warning. We do show some road crash scenes, nothing graphic, but we just do want to warn that if that's something that could disturb you, please just take note of it. We're trying to learn how to prevent and lessen severity of these incidents. But yeah, I just wanted to flag that. So during these sessions, we've got Kez in the background who's there helping out and monitoring. But your way to talk to us is using the chat function. So we want you typing in there questions that you've got or comments. Now you can use the little drop-down menu there and talk to everybody, or just talk to hosts and panelists, which is Kez and myself, if there's something you just want to talk to us about. If for some reason the chat's not appearing for you or not working, you can try the Q&A, or if you wanted to put something in anonymously, you could do it through the Q&A as well. But we prefer the chat, and we love it when people are making comments and people are able to share their thoughts on things. In some of the sessions, we do ask for volunteers to raise their hand for us to be able to give you the ability to unmute yourself and talk to a case study or the like. So that is there. Or if you're really desperate to talk to something, you can put your hand up and we can give you that ability. There's no ability to have your cameras on at any point in this webinar version. And we go with this one rather than the meeting style, just because we don't have dogs barking in the background or people, colleagues shouting in the background and those sort of things. So it just keeps it a little bit easier from that sense. Now, if your tech fails, usually log out, log back in, and it fixes it. And of course, if worse comes to worse, you can just watch the recording. The learning management system, you should have received an email from Safe System Solutions that will give you access to the learning management system. You might need to check your junk mail for that, but it is, well, you can't pass this course without getting access to the learning management system. It houses the quizzes that you've got to do. It's where you upload assignments. It's where you've got the resources that we're providing. It's very important you get access. So if you haven't got access yet, you should look for that email. If you can't find that or you can't get access, just simply reply to the email that you got to get you to this stage, or contact the training@safesystemsolutions.com.au email, or even pop something into the chat or the Q&A, and Kez will be able to help out. Okay, so the two presenters for this, myself, Ken Beer, I'm the principal engineer at Safe System Solutions. And before that, spent a lot of time working in government, looking after road safety engineering and transport planning for a while, and a lot of the standards and guidelines and associated with road safety infrastructure, road safety auditing, and helping develop safe system assessments. My colleague Max McArdle will step in for some of the sessions. He's got certain expertise around cycling infrastructure and walking infrastructure, road safety around that, and he's very experienced safe system assessor, so he'll be jumping in for a couple of those. Now, our contact details you'll see there. So if you've got any questions about the technical aspects of safe system assessing or the safe system, you can email through to us or give us a call, and we can cover those. And a couple of little things just to keep you, I suppose, keep you interactive. We have Wally the Wombat warning sign. So Wally will appear a random number of times during each module, so each session that we have. And one of the things you'll be asked to do in the quizzes, the competency test quizzes, at the end of each session is just to tell us how many times Wally appeared. So keep an eye out for Wally. That one doesn't count. Wally count currently is 0, so that's not one of them. Keep an eye out for Wally. Also, there is a chance to win a prize. Lots of chances to win prizes, actually. So if you ask good questions, answer the questions that I ask in the chat, if you volunteer for case studies, or if you arrive a little bit early to the sessions, we'll just do some, well, Kez, you'll probably you run the trivia, won't you?
I will, yeah.
Yep, and general knowledge trivia or road safety trivia or whatever you decide, eh?
Yeah, bit of both.
Okay. So arrive a little bit early and yeah, jump in. I'll give out lots of prizes as we go. How do you get your prizes? Well, when you successfully complete the course, you'll get an electronic copy of your certificate. You'll also later on get in the post a hard copy of certificate and any prizes you picked up along the way. So we have a competency benchmark. So there's some requirements and then a competency mark that you've got to get. So you have to attend 4 out of the 5 live webinars and view the one you don't attend. If you're having trouble with that for one reason or another, get in contact with somebody, the training team or myself or Kez, and just say you're not able to make another one for some reason, and they'll have a chat to you about how we can accommodate that. You need to complete all the set tasks, of course, and then you need to get an 80% pass mark. So you need to get above 80% on all the quizzes and assignments. You have up to 3 attempts. We will provide one-on-one coaching if you need it, and you're welcome to reach out for that. And one of our senior engineers or safe system assessors will be able to have a Zoom call with you or provide written advice, and we will do all we can to ensure that you are at that 80% pass mark. Now, nothing in there is overly complicated, and everything will be covered in the session. So I don't think you shouldn't have too much trouble getting to that pass mark. Now, Kez, before I hand over to you to cover off anything I've missed, I'll take this opportunity to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the many lands that we're running this training on, and being in this digital world, we can spread ourselves quite far and wide, which is wonderful. And I acknowledge the traditional custodians of the varied lands, pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging in those various areas. Is there anything I missed, Kez?
I don't think so, no. I think that's everything. I'm going to sit here in the prize pit and look out for those questions and answers. Nothing in the chat yet, though. Okay.
Yep, so the prize bit is there. Oh, prizes could be anything. I think.
Anything?
Yes, any of those. Superman doll? No, I don't think those will quite be the prizes, but you'll get something exciting. Okay. Well, that's good, but do pop your questions and comments into the chat. And I suggest you do that as you think of it, rather than waiting for me to ask, does anybody have any questions? Because there's that bit of a lag between you typing and me getting to answering the question. Oh, Chantel won a Barry. A Barry is a barrier measuring device. Wonderful. I hope you're using it wisely. Okay, I just wanted to pop this up very briefly to give a bit of context before we jump into it, because there are quite a few independent assessments within road transport across Australia, New Zealand, and across the world. I'll only cover off a few of them here, but just to give a little bit of initial context, because I get this question a lot. So a lot of people have heard of road safety audits. They've been around for 30 years or so. They provide that independent assessment of a road transport project. They provide really great value. Design reviews as part of any new infrastructure, somebody will design it and somebody should be doing a design review to check the calculations, check the right assumptions were made, looking at different aspects to it. So those there is overlap there. Safe system assessments also overlap quite a bit with some of this. So that's what we'll be talking about for this one. There's a lot that sort of sits outside with safe system assessments. The idea of safety in design is often confused with safe system assessments, but safety in design really talks about, can what we are going to be building, can it be built safely? Can it be maintained safely? Can it be decommissioned safely? It's a bit more around the occupational health and safety side of safety, and safe system assessments are really at that road user end. And then I've put here DDA audit, like a Disability Discrimination Act, or it's called different things in different places, but it's the idea of reviewing, can all members of our society use this new facility that we're building, if they're in a wheelchair, if they're vision impaired, or any other things, can they get the benefit as well. So there are a few. You can see there's overlapping bits and pieces. That's obviously not to scale or anything like that. It's just trying to show how they overlap a bit. The focus of this one will be safe system assessments, and certainly I run the road safety audit course in quite a number of jurisdictions, yeah, hopefully it'll become a little bit clearer, but I thought I'd do that straight off the bat, and now we'll jump into some of the content. Okay, so a question in there's come in, CPTED, which is, what does that stand for? Crime prevention through engineering design. Yeah, so that's another one that you could, certainly if I jump back to that would overlap in there a little bit as well. Probably, yeah, I don't know how I would draw that to overlap with some of them. So there you go. We could probably list, in fact, I did at one point list as many sort of road safety or safety related tools and assessment techniques as I could possibly think of. And we over 50 different ways from around the world and around Australia and New Zealand that you can do this. Road safety audits and safe system assessments are probably the most commonly known independent ones, and those design reviews as well. Okay, let's get into some content. I do have some interaction. I'll be asking you to do little things throughout this session, and I will give you a 5-minute coffee break in here about half time. So while we're here to talk about safe system assessments, the first thing we've got to do is all get ourselves on the same page around this idea of the safe system. Because to do a safe system assessment, yes, you need to understand the mechanics of, where do I put things in a table and how do I do that? But far more important than the specifics of that is, understanding the philosophy of the safe system and being able to provide advice to project teams or to local governments or to state governments or federal governments or whoever's managing this project as to how they can do better in getting alignment with these principles of the safe system. So I'll delve into that now, which may be a reminder for some of you. It may be new stuff for some of you. It may slightly put a different lens on some of the things you had assumed associated with the safe system. And I certainly welcome conversation in this, so pop things into the chat as we go. But really for the end of this module, so the end of today's session, I want you to be able to list the principles and elements or pillars, as some people call them, of the safe system. We want to delve into kinetic energy thresholds for different crash types and talk about the way we've approached road safety in the past and how we want to be approaching it under this safe system philosophy. We want to get into best practice around behavioural change and vehicle safety interventions, and we're going to talk a bit about speed, and speed is pretty critical to the safe system approach. So we will delve into that. So there's a Wally. Wally count is 1. No more help from me on Wallies. Keep your eye out for Wally. Okay. So across Australia, New Zealand, and a lot of jurisdictions around the world are now sort of making these commitments to the safe system approach. They're making commitments to often the implementation of a Vision Zero, a vision through the safe system approach. And we see that time and time again, that high levels of government sign up to this idea of the safe system. Do they understand what that means on the ground in terms of some of the people signing this? I'm not sure. And are we fully committing to it? Often not in the way we play it out, but we hold a pretty exciting point that a lot of people have committed to this philosophy. A lot of jurisdictions are in, and we can help them with safe system assessments to hold them a bit to account in their implementation of the safe system. I popped a few of the strategies up there that have made pretty strong commitments from different jurisdictions, but I'm sure you can find many more. And just briefly, for safe system assessments as that independent review of alignment with safe system principles, I did this little diagram a while back just to show where different jurisdictions are with that commitment. But there is a lot of requirement now for safe system assessments across Australia and New Zealand to be done. So certainly Victoria has some project dollar thresholds that say, well, we must do them for any project above $2 million total investment costs. South Australia is the same. Aotearoa, New Zealand is certainly committed and saying that they'll be done on everything. Queensland's a bit the same. New South Wales has just recently made some commitments. So we're getting good traction. There's a lot of interest in it. So you're in at the right time. The governments are making these commitments now, and they're looking for practitioners to help out doing these assessments. So we're going to get you at a point where you're going to be able to help them achieve their the mandated requirements governments are putting down. So the safe system comes in all these different diagrams. So people sort of trying to represent this idea. I'm going to start with this diagram, and I'm going to take you back in time. I'm going to take you back in time to a point where the safe system was just being committed to within Australia. Now, I'll give a prize here. Oh, I should say, in the live sessions, you don't lose any marks. There's no marking of anything in the live sessions. It's just discussion and free. So you can, guess at things and throw in ideas, and you won't lose any marks. It's when after the session, you do an actual quiz you're marked on. But what year did the federal government of Australia commit formally to the safe system approach? Have a guess. And this is the diagram we were committing to at the time. So Albert's had a guess there. It's closest so far because the only one that's popped up. Anybody else want to have a guess? Okay, we're getting some good guesses coming in here. Kez, you're looking intently there. I'm giving it a second just to see if we get a bit of a spread. Mark was winning, and hello, Mark, all the way from Northern Ontario there. Welcome. Mark was closest until Belinda jumped in. Oh, no. And then Kirsten and Victor, I think, are going to share the prize. The 2 prizes on that one, because it was right in between. It was 2004. So nearly 20 years ago, there was these commitments to the safe system. So that's interesting, isn't it? It's been around quite a while. Really, it's amazing that it sort of takes that amount of time often for these things to get traction and really starting to move and being integrated as a serious part of road projects and the way we manage our transport system. But let me take you back there to 2004. And I was working in VicRoads, the Victorian Road Authority at the time, doing a lot of Austroads interaction work with the jurisdictions about taking some European philosophies and trying to get something for Australia that we would all commit to. And this diagram was produced, and right at the middle of it was human tolerance to physical force. How much force can we take as humans before we break? So that's an interesting thing to start with when we think about managing a transport system, isn't it? So how much force can we take before we break? I'll come back to that. And then we said, well, what are the levers that we've got to be able to pull to create this system? And they said, well, okay, well, we've got the roads and the roadsides and how we design it, manage it, and operate. We've got the vehicles that we allow on the network, and then we've also got the speeds, and we can have some control over the speeds that are traveled. And that was then the system, okay? A circle was drawn around that system. That's it. That's the safe system. And some people then said, what about the road user? Surely we have to have safe road users and be, they've got to be alert and compliant in order to have a safe system. And that then immediately split the camp. And we had one group saying, it's the road user, they have to, act appropriately and be alert and compliant. Where this other group saying, no, what? The humans, they fail all the time. They're hopeless. Like, we should have a system that is impenetrable to all those mistakes. And the argument went on. And then they put in this little alert and compliant road user square around this system, right? And now, and after a few years, it was generally acknowledged that's a fail. That made the whole thing kind of fail. Because, why? Because we can't guarantee we're going to have an alert and compliant road users. And it's the easiest thing to possibly do is to blame a road user. There's almost always fault from a road user. And I've investigated hundreds of fatalities and serious injuries in depth. And I can only really think of one, maybe two, where I would say that I couldn't, if I wanted to, attribute blame to a road user. And that was when it was literally a tree fell on the car as they were driving. So, I mean, but for 300, 400 of them that I've done, absolutely I could blame an individual for not being alert or compliant. But how do we progress? How do we get better? How do we transform our system if we just keep doing that? Some people might say then, well, you change the driver, like you improve the driver, or you improve the rider or the walker. Okay, that is the hardest thing to do and is the least sustainable, because we keep getting new ones and they're biologically the same and you have to do it all again. Now, I'm not saying we're not going to get any further benefit from trying to get better drivers and better riders and better walkers and better safety culture, but we need to accept the limitations of humans and we need to start designing for that limitation. So that one got turfed. That one got turfed out. And then when people started developing up all these other diagrams, usually a circle, people went with a circle, and you've probably seen lots of them and they're out there. I'm going to talk to this one for this course. And we've still got a person at the middle. And we're saying that, we should be designing this transport system with the aspiration to eliminate death and serious injury. It's just unacceptable for us to trade off human life and health for minor transport gains. Then we've got these interesting principles. Human bodies are vulnerable. So it's still there. Didn't mean to cross it out. It's still there, absolutely. Human bodies are vulnerable. So that's a pretty important one. We've acknowledged that people make mistakes. And we say we've got a shared responsibility. Then we've got these levers we can do that. The vehicles, the speeds, the road users and improvements there, and the roads and roadsides. But I want to talk to a couple of these particular principles very briefly, and then I'll ask you to be doing some stuff fairly shortly. I might jump to the next slide actually to talk to some of these. We have an aspiration of no death or serious injury. Now, I know this is a ways away, and this can sometimes get people a bit switched off because they can't visualize any future where there is no death or serious injury. I like to often just say, well, let's all agree that we should have road transport in a similar safety envelope as any other type of transport, be it aviation, be it rail, be it sea travel. Why do we say we accept a large amount of death and serious injury per kilometre travelled or per individual for roads travel, but travel in these other modes is very, very safe comparatively? And sometimes that makes it a lot more palatable to people. Some people are very much, want to talk about zero and how we get to zero, what date we can get to zero and how that might play out. That's a whole sort of other area, and it's very fascinating in how you can do that with understanding what vehicles of the future are doing and how our road designs can alter and how we need legislative and political commitments and major changes. But the basis that I want you to get to is to say that death and serious injury is unacceptable. Unacceptable in our road transport system. And that is not just something that happens. And it's not the cost we pay to have a transport system. We challenge that. People are vulnerable. Okay, this is one of the biggest changes for anybody who is a road designer or a road engineer or a technical officer, has any management responsibility of a road network. Now, the vulnerability of the human body is a design parameter. Okay, you might design to 1 in 100-year flood, right, for your drainage. You might design to a V4 lighting requirement at an intersection. Just the way you absolutely don't question, designing to some of those parameters, we need to design to the biomechanical tolerances of the human body in the crashes that we foresee at that location. And I'm going to give you some information on those, speeds and angles and crash forces. They become design parameters. We've got to meet that in our road network. People are vulnerable. Human frailty is a design parameter. Because people are going to make mistakes. Gee, we're going to try to minimize mistakes as much as we can. Absolutely. We're going to try to make people better. But we need to manage when they fail. And they will. I've made many mistakes already today. Minor things, little bits and pieces, probably nobody will notice, but we make mistakes all the time. And we're just putting those mistake making sometimes into environments where the forces are just unsurvivable. And this shared responsibility becomes an interesting one. And it's actually very different to saying the road user is responsible and we're responsible. It is acknowledging everybody plays a role, but most evolved societies when it comes to the management of road safety will talk about the system designers having the ultimate responsibility. And this makes some people really uncomfortable. But the system designers, who are all of us, okay, if you've got any say in the management of the road network or the vehicles that get on there or anything like that, we have the ultimate responsibility. And if incidents occur, we can try and learn everything we can, but ultimately we didn't create a system around that failure that meant it didn't result in death or serious injury. As I say, if you want to go the other way, you can easily find blame to a road user. But what benefit does that do? We don't get change. We're not progressing if we just look for blame. So we want to look at our holistic system. What do we need to change? So either this crash doesn't happen, or when it does happen again, which it will, it doesn't result in death or serious injury. So I want to take you out of road transport, because we all grew up around roads, using roads, and it's so intertwined in the way we look at the transport system. We cannot, it's so hard to extract yourself out and look at the roads in a different way, because that's what they are. Right? So let's go to another industry. Let's go to manufacturing. We're going to go to manufacturing of widgets, in fact. And I'm going to take you through like safety culture basics here. Okay. So when you have a dangerous area, dangerous system, so like back in the day, these factories, they were somewhat open systems. So they were getting workers in, they would give them a bit of training, they would tell them how dangerous it is, tell them what to do, watch out for this. They'd have, you know, the kids, they say, okay, your job's to clean here, don't touch that, don't put your arm near there. But if you have an inherently dangerous system and you push the responsibility of safety to the individual, that's what we call a pathological safety culture. Okay. Then you sort of elevate up from that and you get to this reactive safety culture. And that's where, you know, kids have had their arms ripped off while they're cleaning these machines, or people have been crushed and there are incidents, and they go and fix that specific little bit. Put a little guard on that machine, put a fence around this bit so people can't walk in there and get crushed. And so it's really that reactive culture. Then we elevate to calculating. And this is where economists usually get involved. Okay, and they start to say, you know, your factory here and your other factories, yeah, you're paying out a fair bit to people, the families of people who have been injured and killed. And it's a lot of lost production time when the machines are down because of that. You know, if you were to proactively invest a little bit of money in these areas, you would actually see a return on that investment in widget production. So, yeah, back in the day it was pounds, so they probably went, you know, if you invest £30,000 across your factories in these safety improvements, it'll return £60,000 in benefit, in more widget sales. And we've come up with a thing called a benefit cost ratio, and it gives you a benefit cost ratio of 2. Every pound invested gives £2 in return, and so they go and invest. So that's what we call a calculating safety culture. Then we elevate to what we call a proactive safety culture, and this is safe system. This is where we're seeing safe system play out. And it says we need a very high level of safety. And then we can produce widgets as much as we can within that level of safety. But safety sets the precondition for widget production. And then you need to heavily invest in maintaining that safety culture. So that'll be, you know, maintaining the safety culture, but maintaining any assets you have associated with it. Now, across the world, where do we sit Well, across Australia, maybe where do we sit um, with the road transport system, which I know you've been now thinking about the road transport system with this. Well, we certainly have a lot of pathological stuff going on where we absolutely know it's an unsafe environment out there. We give licenses to people and we say, it's dangerous out there. You've got to protect yourself. Yeah. Even some of our legislation is set up in that way. We're reactive. We certainly look for crashes. We go and address those. Do a BCR calculation. My gosh, BCR calculations in transport economics is it's very entrenched. But we do see some proactive things, and so there's a lot of hope. For me, one of the most exciting examples of proactive stuff actually occurred quite a while back, which is interesting, and it was school speed zones. Why do I say school speed zones are a proactive thing? Well, they're a proactive thing because they certainly don't meet the calculating. They're not reactive because we don't only put school speed zones where kids have been killed and seriously injured. And they're not pathological in the sense that we're not pushing the responsibility of safety all back to the school children. Interestingly, when you do a calculating look at school speed zones using very well-established transport economics, it's just a horrible investment. We've done it. And because the reason for that is, let me just very briefly tell you about how this would work, or how it does work. You basically say, where are all the schools and where are all these school speed zones going in? And what's the speed cars travel past there at the moment? And what's the speed that they will travel past there when these school speed zones are in? And what you do is you take these small reductions in or small increases in travel time, and you add them all up for all the road users that go through them. And then you get this bucket of time. And you multiply that bucket of time by the average productivity of an Australian, $88 an hour or something for input to the economy, and you get this whopping dollar figure. And then you say, okay, how many lives are we going to save as a result of this? And they look at then, well, how many kids have been killed and seriously injured in all of these areas? And what do we predict for the future? And what is that reduction in speed going to give us in terms of lessening that? And then they go to the Bureau of Transport Economics and they get a dollar value on human life. And they put a dollar value to the amount of life that they're going to save. And the dollar value is not enough for the cost. So it's a bad investment. There's just not enough kids killed and seriously injured. And it's so grotesque when you put it in that perspective that we would do that. But that is exactly how we do it for everywhere else, basically. So we need to challenge that and say, no, we need our level of safety. And sure, we can travel up to and within that envelope. So, yeah, just one example there. Okay, time for a little just quiz, get you doing something. So a quiz is going to pop up on your screen, hopefully. Don't worry if it doesn't. You're not being marked on anything. Sometimes a firewall may block it. But a quiz is going to pop up and you answer multiple choice. So the first one we've been talking about, the second one we haven't, but it's you can have a guess at it. So they've come up there. The first question is, which of the following is not a key principle of the safe system? Is not. So you can have a look through that and have a ponder. And then the next one's about Usain Bolt and his world record 100-meter sprint. And what was the speed in kilometers per hour when he crossed the finish line? So you can have a guess at that. So we'll give you a couple of minutes or a minute to do that. We will have a break a little bit later. So Okay, we're doing well here. Give you another 10 seconds. Okay, Kez, let's end that poll and we'll share the results. Okay, so almost everybody's onto that idea that we're not under a safe system aiming for no mistakes on the road. I mean, in some utopian world, we'd love that. We're just realistic. It's not going to happen. So what we need to do is minimize and manage. Minimize mistakes and manage all the ones that get through. And get ourselves in a mindset that they will happen, and our system needs to be designed to cater for that. I'm not going to encourage it, but we're going to cater for it. Okay, Usain Bolt, and I have asked this question to some of you before, I think, so you're onto it. Usain Bolt crossed the finish line at 44 kilometers per hour, somewhere around that. Maybe people were calculating it based on distance and time, but maybe not accounting for acceleration and the like. So let's get rid of that, Kez. And I am going to. Why on earth am I asking a question about Usain Bolt in a road safety course? You might be asking yourself. Well, I want you to imagine parking a Toyota Camry, maybe a 2015 Toyota Camry, at the end of Usain Bolt's lane, and he's running down there at 44 kilometers an hour, and bang, he hits that car. Will he survive? Will he survive that? Well, yeah, he probably will, but he's very well built for withstanding force. Okay, let's have a look here. This is information about collision speed. Okay, that is the speed of impact, not speed limit, speed of impact, and the chance it will result in death to a member of our community. And this is not just Usain Bolt. This is all of our community. Old people, young people, more frail, more solid. And this green line here is passenger vehicle striking a pedestrian. And you can see there, sort of 10, 20 kilometers an hour. We're fairly confident most of our community is going to survive being struck at those speeds. Up around 60, 70, 80 kilometers per hour, we're pretty confident that the pedestrian will be killed. We see an exponential kick up around this 30 kilometers per hour. So things go really bad really quickly after that speed, as you increase speed after that. Great man comes in a little bit higher due to his very solid stature, but remember that line's for everybody in the community. But we have this information for other crash types. I've got a little demonstration there of the forces we are designed for. Hopefully that's streamed for you. But humans have kind of evolved to run into solid stuff. I don't know, chasing a woolly mammoth or something at full speed and into a tree. We're designed to withstand that force. Yes, it'll hurt. We'll recover, hopefully, in a period of time. He broke a few ribs. Then he came back next year, won the gold medal. So, we're designed for that. But when we get these vehicles coming at us with higher speeds than we were ever designed to withstand, or we're in crash scenarios with forces beyond what we can withstand, it's where we see our death and serious injury. Very basic concept, but it's important for us to think about this and think about the physics of it, and then design our road network accordingly. So we have this for right angle crashes. So this is bullet vehicle. So the bullet vehicle is the one that does the damage in a crash. And this is a target vehicle. So the bullet vehicle speed, down here we see 40, around about 50 kilometers per hour bullet vehicle speed on a right angle crash is where things go really bad really quick. And for head-on crashes, we understand that around that, 50, 60, 70 kilometre per hour is generally survivable. But as we go higher than that, it gets really bad really quickly. Now, throughout this course, you'll see little symbols like this for different topics, and it's one where you get some more information if you click on that. You're able to download the PDFs of these slides from the learning management system, click on those, and you can get a little more information. So the question in there, which is a really good question, Mohammed's put in there, and I think a prize-worthy one, Kez. Why didn't we put school speed zones to 30 kilometres an hour rather than 40 kilometres per hour? Because of just what we've seen there, where it would make a lot more sense. And it is a really good question. So I can give you the theoretical reason and part of, the original thinking, or the practical reason. Well, the reality was that it was people saying that, that's an acceptable speed. Like we're bringing the risk down, and they're not wrong with bringing the risk down. It hasn't quite taken into account that physical force. Then there's often the argument that people will brake, and so the speeds will be lower. That doesn't really align well with safe system principles, because we know some of that won't happen. And then Chantal has put it exactly what I was about to say. There are some jurisdictions around the world that have moved to not only school speed zones of 30, but whole urban areas of 30, and being that speed. So New Zealand is sort of leading the way in that space. But we see that for a lot of this stuff, is that we're working our way in transforming a massive amount of road network into a more safer system, and it's sort of sometimes incremental in our gains. Good question, though. And Albert's got some good points in there around how it interacts with other speed zones. So that point where things go really bad really quickly is become a really interesting and important point. 30 kilometres an hour, pedestrians, 50 kilometres per hour, right angle, 70 kilometres per hour, head on. Partly because it goes, exponentially bad beyond that, or really bad really quickly beyond that. And also, I suppose it is maybe a little bit of acknowledgement of we are on a massive transition. It's so much of our road network doesn't even come close to meeting these speeds, that we are sort of transitioning our way along this. But you'll use these sorts of threshold speeds when you're thinking about the severity of impact of predicted crashes in your assessment. And to help you along even further, and this is a little window into module 4, where we start getting into the mechanics of the safe system assessment. You can see here that we put scores to the severity of impacts we expect to happen on road lengths or at intersections. And you can see there that we've got lots more crash types put into here. So we could talk about motorcyclists versus cars, or we could talk about pedestrian cars we were just talking about. You can see at low speeds, we're in the 0 to 1, but then when we're up around the 40s and 50s and 60s, we're into the high end severity. So you can get some more indication of scores that we will put to the assessment of what we're predicting with either a future design or an existing piece of road. I will come back to this. It's a pretty important part of safe system assessing, is to start to quantify how bad things are going to be when they do happen. Because often jurisdictions sort of put their head in the sand and hope that they will somehow miraculously make it never happen. But we, as safe system assessors, are squarely in the point of saying it will happen, and how bad is it going to be? Yes, we also look at how do we try and stop it, happening in the first place as much as we possibly can. But we have to quantify this. And here's a little thing that is the bane of my existence in road safety in my 25 years or whatever it's been in working in road safety. And it's not because it's wrong, and it's not because it's not good research, but about every 5 years or so, there is the world's biggest crash causation study released, a new one. Somebody does their PhD or some government invests huge sums of money to do crash causation studies. And what crash causation studies are doing is taking crashes, and they usually, take a massive amount of crashes, 1,000 crashes, and they do really in-depth root cause analysis of crashes, and they come back with this thing that they say, huge reports, really great academic rigor, and they'll show that somewhere between 88% and 95% of the cause of crashes is human error, driver error. Driver or road user. Some of them are road user. This 2003 one just happened to be drivers, so we've got driver there. And then they show there's a bit of overlap between vehicle issues and some, and road issues and some, and there's a little bit that sits outside it, but it's predominantly people making mistakes. And the reason this is the bane of my existence is that the natural reaction to that is, well, we know what the biggest problem is now, so let's work on that. And everybody then starts to focus their attention on trying to change the human, which is the hardest thing and the most unsustainable thing to be changing in your system. Not saying that we ignore it, but we just need to recognize. We need to change our attitude to that. And it needs to be that our system failed. Of course the human failed. We know that. It's funny, these crash causation studies have been going on for about 50 years. And every time they come out with the same results that say it's human failure. We're finally going, well, perhaps we should design for that human failure after the 25th crash causation study that told us the same thing. And say, how do we alter the system to accommodate that? Now, some people put, I've taken this directly from Austroads. They had driver access and driver experience as these sort of outer things. I just practically want to put them in and just say they're system failures too. They're slightly different system failures. But a Centre for Automotive Safety Research out of the University of Adelaide report, which was done for Austroads, showed some interesting stuff. Human error in the transport system. And this actually, as far as I can tell, and I haven't seen any reports as comprehensive, but the same themes tend to come out across the world, is that we see there are these different types of crashes. So this is just accepted human factor stuff: slips, lapses, mistakes, unintentional violations, and deliberate violations. But we see about 70% of death and serious injury occurring due to these types of errors, and sort of our 30% down here. But this area tends to get a lot more attention out of the media, and the general public would very much think it's the other way around, if not 100%, all these deliberate violators, because it's a very graphic, very obvious, very infuriating things that are happening out there, and they make amazing news stories and people remember them, and it gets a lot of that concentration. But the bulk of our trauma sits above here. Generally, people trying to go about their business, and our system just being inadequate to handle the human failures that occur. Now, this becomes a really interesting one, because this often needs to be treated in a very different way, and it's a very challenging, and it's very integrated with societal challenges. I was part of an Austroads study looking at recidivist offenders in road transport. Not my area of specialty, by the way. I'm an infrastructure guy, but it was interesting to be involved in it. And really, one of the big takeaways were down in below the line there is that people drive the way they live. I thought that's fascinating. And it's fascinating in the sense of how, this is below the line, there is bigger picture sort of stuff. And there's lots of interesting socioeconomic links and programs that are changing lives rather than just changing particular aspects that play out, being driving or other things. So that's a fascinating area. But above the line there, 70% of our death and serious injury can be transformed as we change the system around. Okay, what I'm going to do, and timing is coming along nicely here, is I'm going to give you a little exercise in a second, and Kez, I'll get you to, in a second, we'll bring that up. There will be a poll that'll pop up. But this is just a little chance to consolidate some of my discussion here and some of your thinking into a little bit of mix and match. So we've got traditional approaches to road safety on the left, and we've got where we're trying to get to with a safe system on the right. And the poll will come up shortly that shows the first thing in a traditional approach, and then you get to click on which you think we're trying to move towards. I'll admit some of these could go to multiple spots, so don't get too hung up on it. Just use this to consolidate your thinking. But I'm also going to give you a chance to have a stretch, fill up your coffee, and we're going to come back into it in 5 minutes. So I want you to do this, and the poll should have popped up on your screen now. Don't worry if your poll hasn't popped up. It's just consolidating thinking. You could type it into the chat if you want. 5 minutes, have a stretch, do the poll, and we'll get back into it. And I'll give it another 10 seconds as people get back to their seats, make themselves comfortable again. I think this has worked quite well for people to have a little bit more of a think about this, consolidate that thinking. 5 seconds. If you haven't quite submitted, make your last guesses. Okay, let's stop the poll and have a look at the results. Actually, I might use the screen for this. Let's get rid of the poll results. That was good to see, though. We had some uniformity, and as I mentioned, some could have gone to a number of areas. But instead of sort of blaming the individuals involved, looking for that fault, we're recognizing human error, minimizing its consequence. We're recognizing that shared responsibility. So road user education and compliance has been a huge focus in the past. Now we're thinking holistically as a system and a forgiving system. It won't ignore road user education and compliance, but it's just more recognizing of its limitations. So the idea of crash reduction versus the idea of enhanced consequence, enhanced focus on the consequence. So this is where people striving for absolute elimination of crashes has been a distraction to understanding that some will still occur and we need to manage those. So the idea of these 4 pillars acting independently versus this optimization and interacting elements of the system is more where we want to go. And of course, that mobility safety balance versus maximizing safe mobility. So as I say, just something to help consolidate that thinking, help you get your head around where we're trying to go. And a nice little statement from a Western Australian, Ian Cameron, and he said, I think this was on a UN world stage. He said, we need a paradigm shift in road safety policy to stop the road death epidemic, and we need it now. It is unrealistic to expect that education and enforcement alone will bring the needed step change. Even road users who know and follow the rules make mistakes. A safe system creates an environment in which simple mistakes will no longer kill people. and seriously injured people is what we want as well. A nice little statement. But let's dive our way straight into the road environment. And I know a lot of you, the bulk of you are, one way or another involved in infrastructure. And let's have a look at this bit of road. Now, you probably don't know this bit of road. Some of you might, but probably don't know. And you can see that there is a road safety barrier in the median there. It's a narrow flushed median. And you can see it's a wire rope safety barrier system. I'll show you another little bit of this road, and then I'm going to get some interaction going. There you go. You can see another bit of the road there. Now, this has obviously been installed because I've got photos of it and you can see it. But during the planning, the development and the design of this project, which was trying to take a road that was separated by a white line or two white lines in terms of streams of traffic, and implementing this barrier system down the middle of the road to separate those streams of traffic. The teams in the planning and the development and the design faced all sorts of challenges, okay? Lots of challenges. And I'm going to give you a chance in the chat just to write down some of the challenges that you think they may have faced, okay? And yeah, I'll give out some prizes just for, ones I find particularly interesting, may not have been the biggest ones or not, but I'll let you just type a few in. Okay. So, this is, this group is very good at identifying reasons why this possibly can't go in. And these are all issues, and it didn't take long, did it, to find, I'm seeing almost 50 reasons why this possibly can't go in. And you come up with some very, very relevant ones and ones that were very real in this implementation. So Mark sort of straight off the bat gone into the politicians there and the political political challenges we often face. So we've got the space, embankments, and the widths, emergency vehicle access. How do the emergency vehicles get to areas? Not wide enough. Which types of barriers to use and which not to use. Deflection. I saw that come up a couple of times. Kez, I might get you to look into that. I think the deflection of the barrier system is worthy of prizes for anybody who's into that nuance, because that one boggled my mind in the sense that this barrier will deflect. Some of you know how these barriers work. Will deflect, and then we'll just go a little bit. I've exaggerated that. It'll go a little bit into the oncoming lane. Under a particular crash scenario with a particular vehicle, it'll just drift into the oncoming lane. And that pretty much held this project up and almost stopped the installation of this, because it wouldn't conform to the standards, which was that you couldn't, be in that, deflected into that area. And so the option was to leave the white line there because that met a standard. And the ridiculous of nobody was, some people were, but people weren't standing back and looking at what they were demanding there. That they would rather have no protection than a protection that doesn't quite meet a standard by a little bit. It was crazy. So yeah, cost was a big, and not just like cost of the system. Is this is the benefit cost ratio of this up to it? Because are there really enough people being killed or seriously injured? Which comes back to that little bit of thinking around the school speed zone one, which is, that question is not asked in that way. Oh my gosh, this group, it's like you've all tried to implement these with the issues that are coming up. And I'm not going to have time to go through and work through all of these. Drainage culvert, winter, property accesses. So people are asking, what do we mean by deflection? Hopefully my little explanation there. So a vehicle that leaves the road, that once they've hit it, the barrier, the posts break away and the wires retain, and then the whole system deflects. Maintenance of the systems, maintenance of the road next to the systems. So the reason I did that little exercise is because there is always reasons that come up because we are changing the way that we have had these roads forever nearly. And we're questioning some of these things that keep killing and seriously injuring our community, like separating high-speed traffic with lines. And so this will change the way that road, it's been there for a huge amount of time, and this is a big change to it. And people will resist that. And there will be lots of, things that we need to practically work through. But these are now going in significantly across Australia, across New Zealand, across the world. The Europeans have been doing it for a long time. Okay, all of these issues that were brought up immediately there need to be thought through in the design and managed. But you can't lose sight of the fundamentals of the fact that we need to separate high-speed traffic. Now, here's a little interesting one. A road safety audit in its traditional form, we've evolved road safety audits in more recent times, but a lot of jurisdictions really lagging on this. But a road safety audit in its traditional sense does not help these projects really get in. The reason for that is the purpose of a road safety audit of a design like this design is simply to identify risk when that is installed. And what the road safety audit tends to do is go through all of the things that you're coming up with, or most of the things that you're coming up with, and puts risk ratings to those. And sort of what the unintended consequence can be of those sort of reviews is the production of a big report that just makes this look like it's a very high risk thing to do. Now, a safe system assessment is something that actually quantifies the benefit of, and then starts to talk about some of the impacts and things that might need to be adjusted. The road safety audit does a really great job in terms of helping you identify, navigate, and come up with solutions and ways to adjust to counter for some of these issues. But that pure raw, is this a good thing or a bad thing to do, isn't part of the scope of a road safety audit in a traditional sense. As I say, more progressive road safety auditing is now sort of helping that, and you can put statements up the front, but most jurisdictions around the world are still just using that audit. But a safe system assessment does a really wonderful thing here. And had there been safe system assessments as part of this project, I think it would have been implemented far quicker than it finally was, once it got installed. But of course, it got hit, and absolutely, it gets hit. It's what it's there for. And In a great little experience with this one of the times it got hit, somebody called up the road manager in this, the road authority, and they just wanted to thank whoever had put in that system. That's a pretty amazing thing. If you've ever worked in a regional office or a council office, not many people calling up to thank you for stuff you've done. It's more shout at you for stuff you've done. But that engineer up there in Northeast Victoria was smart enough to get the comms people and make a little video with those people involved. So that's going to be in the learning management system for you to watch. And to me, this is one of the clearest examples of safe system in action, because human failed, absolutely no doubt about it. They fell asleep. They even put their hand up and said, I fell asleep. I was actually tired. I knew I was tired. I was trying to get home and I fell asleep. Right? But then the system catered for that mistake and made it so nobody was killed or seriously injured. If that barrier wasn't there and the head-on crash had occurred, everybody would have just been saying, why did you drive? What? You're tired? You knew you were tired? We've got to educate people on not driving when they're tired. Okay, that's a good thing to continue to do, but it's not really going to get us to the position of the system catering for it, whereas the barrier system does. Okay, Chantel's made a really good point there, that road safety audits are often undertaken by road designers who are well versed in design standards rather than sort of safe system thinking. And they often don't take into account even if something is to standard or if it's the safest. And that's absolutely. I think that's prizeworthy because it sums it up beautifully. We're working a lot with the road safety audit community, and we're changing the Austroads guide to force more thinking around holistic safe system and trying to educate and bring people up. But you know, it's a very, in Australia at least, it's a very well entrenched industry, and it's taking a long time to get some of that change. Okay, I want to briefly touch on other elements of the safe system here, and just give you some insights that you can use when you're talking to people, but also in your safe system assessments. You have the ability in a safe system assessment to think beyond just infrastructure, beyond just the concrete and the asphalt and the barrier system and the like, and think about the road users, thinking about the vehicles and the like. So I'll give you a few little insights. I'm not going to spend long on these. These are also very helpful when you're at the barbecue and you tell somebody you work in road safety or you're doing road safety work, and they will come back with their many ideas on how to fix the issue, which are often, you know, very well proven not to be effective from research and evidence, but the myth is out there, or they're using their own personal experience, which is absolutely certainly not a representative sample, or anything that we should be using in road safety. Might give you some little insights, but that's not how you make decisions. So here's a few little bits of information. So safe road users. We under a safe system, we don't ignore trying to help and encourage safety from road users. And we've really got levers of education, encouragement, enforcement, and the licensing system or entry to the system. And we know that, you know, you can get good benefit in improved use of the road system, especially if we can target the little humans who are very receptive to, you know, learning new things. Can be a good Trojan horse with messages to their parents as well. If you instill, you know, wear your seatbelt in the vehicle, and they will often tell everybody in the vehicle to wear their seatbelt, those sort of things. So, you know, there's possibility. Young drivers have a higher risk profile for a variety of reasons, a lot being biological, and that's what it is. In that age bracket where they start to be able to drive, but also there's a whole lot of stuff going on in life. And what we know sort of works is getting people from this perspective into the safest vehicles, giving them hours of practice on the road. And what we know doesn't work, some things that are big misconceptions out there in society. So advanced driver training courses, they do not work. And in fact, they go the other way. They increase the chance that a young road user will be killed or seriously injured. If sending a young male especially to an advanced driver training course massively increases their risk of being killed or seriously injured, because they get overconfident. They get a new set of skills and they believe that will protect them. And so more risks are taken. And that more risk taking absolutely swamps any minor increases in skills. So I'll come back to that. Got a little sort of summary slide, but I do think this one's also very important about how we communicate road safety through education, behavioural campaigns and the like. So this is mobile phone use. And if we took a stance that said to this driver, hey, if you use your mobile phone when you drive, you'll be killed or seriously injured. That's why that's why we're saying don't do it. It increases your chance of being killed or seriously injured. They won't believe us because the individual says, no, I'm a good driver. I only do that when it's safe. They probably had some reinforcement activity going on in the fact that they've done it for the last 10 years and they've not been killed or seriously injured. And to a degree, they are right. The individual's chance of being killed or seriously injured using their mobile phone on the road network is minuscule. However, we manage a road network thinking of collective risk. And if you add up all of those minuscule risks at an individual level for all the road users, the use of mobile phones is a significant increase in risk holistically compared to not using mobile phones. So we need to stop talking to individuals like they're a collective. And we need to look for things that resonate with them, like this wonderful little ad, which says, is basically saying, if you text and drive, your kid's going to text and drive. And that actually more resonates with a driver to alter their texting and driving behavior, at least with the kids in the car, than at other points. So that is an interesting one. It works very well with speed limiting as well. You tell a community, you tell people we're reducing the speed limit on this road for your safety. They will just say, no, you're not. You're doing it for revenue raising, or this is ridiculous. It's only those people, I don't know, whatever, like they'll blame it on somebody else. We're not the problem. And so we need to look for levers that are something that they will have traction with. Their kids can often be an easy one. We're doing it to protect kids. I mean, that's a little harder to sometimes play out. Things like tailpipe emissions, economic levers, protection of wildlife, these all get great traction on speed limit reductions, far better than protection of humans, because the community just wants to blame a human for making mistakes, whereas they can see those other ones, they don't have that ability to do that. Anyway, I won't go on about it. Just a little summary, what works. So holistically putting education through a whole education system is good. Combining with police and other partner activities is good. There's very motivated people in the community who improve road safety. Our role generally is to ensure that they're investing their time, their effort, their resources into things that have an evidence base. And I'm providing you a fact sheet in the learning management system of some evidence-based things that we can do. Graduated licensing, so that's just having more restrictions on drivers as they enter into the system and easing them off. Education targeting especially motivated groups, so parents being, as I say, sort of most motivated and trying to help them put in place systems to lessen risk for their kids, but others can be pretty motivated as well. And action programs, changing the way road users use the road network. I can talk about that a little bit later. Briefly, things that don't work. So fear tactics don't tend to change behaviour of drivers or riders or walkers or like. They set an interesting platform for legislative change and can be used sparingly if you need to try to convince the public or get some support. But yeah, don't expect behaviour change as a result of shock and awe scare campaigns. Skill-based driver behaviour doesn't work. One-off events, driver simulators. There's not anything proven at this stage that I'm aware of. That changes pretty quick, so you really should try and dig into that a bit more again. Car racing clubs, go-karting clubs, they're all the same in the skills-based driver training from the evaluations of those. Information-only approaches, again, just the statistics behind stuff doesn't change drivers' behaviours. It helps often with platforms for legislative change or investments of different forms, but not so much in terms of getting people to change if they know sort of stats around things. I popped this up there here. It's an interesting one. Learner drivers having supervising drivers and no experience, basically. So I've got somebody sitting next to them who's a supervising driver. We see a very small amount of crashes from raw number perspectives, but also crashes per vehicle kilometres travelled is very low in this category. As soon as they're out there on their own, it skyrockets and it comes down. Now, and it flattens out pretty much around that point. After 8 years, it's fairly flat. Now, people use this research for a number of things, or this output of the research. It's often sort of used to discuss more restrictions and how you use it as a graduated licensing and put restrictions on. What I use this for is when those people come to me and people come to politicians or others and say, what we need more driver training. We need people to be highly skilled drivers, be able to get out of situations. And if everybody was like a Michael Schumacher driver, we would have a safe transport system. Absolutely not. Right? It's just wrong. And in fact, we don't ever see drivers as safe as the ones who have no experience, even by a vehicle kilometres travel perspective. There's so many other factors out there that are influencing risk rather than skills. Certainly we need a basic skill set to navigate the road network, but that's beyond that it's just wasting everybody's time and money to invest in that. I think encouragement is a lacking one in road safety. We haven't done enough encouragement, and I think we should do more. There is some evidence showing that incentivizing campaigns and programs have some benefit on behavioural change, paying people to drive safely, which is essentially, if you don't get any demerit points on your probationary period, you get your license free or discounted or something like that. Those sort of programs have shown some benefit. When we talk about changes, like telling people to drive safely doesn't do much, because what is that? But a specific behaviour is better. Rest every 2 hours or those sorts of specific things. Behavioural change campaigns and initiatives, very hard to evaluate. But we know recall is one important aspect. Do people remember them? Can they recall the messages? And comedy is very effective on that, especially at one of our biggest target audience, which is young males. But we're trying to really change a culture of the way our community looks at road safety. It's very challenging to do, but we continue to work on that, and that's an important part. So we see lots of different things coming out there, talking about other people make mistakes. So it's not saying I'm doing this for your safety. It's, well, others are going to make mistakes. We've got to be catering for that. We'll use Graham a bit. Graham is a life-size sculpture, scarily sort of human-y looking thing that we have, and year 11s go and they look at Graham, and then they do a little exercise with a road environment, and then a virtual Graham. They get a virtual one. They're able to change the road environment, and Graham becomes more human because he's currently designed to withstand the common forces we see out there. And as they take this bit of road and they change the speed limit, he changes. They put a barrier down the middle of the road. He changes back more human, and they raise pedestrian crossing points, put roundabouts in, these sort of things. So it's starting. It's a real culture change, long-term one. It's trying to get a whole suite of the community to be questioning the things that are just inherent in our road transport system. Okay. Enforcement, a supporting aspect to our system. I mean, we can't enforce our way to safety in an inherently unsafe system, but it's certainly an important sort of supporter. We want to be strategic with our enforcement effort, just for the cost and the amount we have out there, and how to deploy it. Specific deterrence versus general deterrence are two sort of enforcement techniques. Specific deterrence, if you've been fined for something, you won't do it again, is the theory. General deterrence is you could be fined for something, so you won't do it. And visual presence, and being that visual presence gives what we call a halo effect, where you get better safety performance around seeing a police presence, and then it sort of diminishes off over time. Yeah, so some good comments in there. Thanks for that, Albert, showing that people do see and kids do what their parents are doing. And Greg's made a good comment in there around a change in that revenue gathering, revenue raising perception, which is really important. Just a little aside, and I think I've got time to do this. In some of the European countries, there has been some trialing and some work around a thing called speed lotto, and I think that this I think is brilliant. So what they do is they have either a point-to-point speed camera, or point-to-point speed cameras was one they were looking at, where, so if you're driving through an area, a photograph is taken of your number plate, and then down the road, it could be 5 kilometers or 10 kilometers, another photo is taken, the time, distance, they work out an average speed. And their trialing was, okay, well, what about we fine everybody that's going over the speed limit on the average speed, but all of that money goes into a pool, and somebody who's not speeding wins all that money in a lottery. And to me, I go, that's a good way to eliminate the revenue raising argument. Plays on a lot of societal challenges in terms of people, have that sense that they're going to win the lottery, but not be involved in road trauma and those sort of things. Interesting little take on that. But automated enforcement is, really there's huge amounts that we can do, and huge amounts that could be done further if we had the political will. Point-to-point speed cameras, as I mentioned there, I think is a really great one. Mobile point-to-point is going to be great. It's coming along nicely, where we can deploy that similar to mobile fixed or mobile cameras at an isolated location. But if you knew that you were potentially going to be monitored for a whole route, that's a really great advantage. And the technology is great. So alcohol interlock systems, where you have to have no alcohol in the system to blow into it. Speed interlock systems, be it ones where you can have a specific key, so you could give your kids one key that locks in maximum speeds in traction control and warning, and not for others. I mean, why don't we have that for everybody is a fair question, but this is my government car, 15 years ago, telling me what the speed zone is, beeping at me if I'm going over the speed limit. When I get back to the office, I could go into the system and get a report of everywhere that I went over a speed limit. I mean, technology is not holding us back here. It's the political will to get that change to happen. So lots of good comments coming in, a bit of chat behind the scenes. So that's good. I like that. And there's some key points in there, which you can, if you're looking at the notes, it's just summarized what I've been talking about. Briefly on the vehicles before I sort of set us up for our next session, which is far more focused just on the infrastructure and speed related discussion. But the vehicles, it's a really exciting and interesting time we're finding ourselves in with vehicle technology and vehicle safety features and automation and all of that sort of stuff that's happening. But it's actually died off a little bit now. People were so excited and convinced that the autonomous vehicles were just going to fix everything, and we'd all be out of a job very shortly, which we're all very excited about. But the reality is it's a very long time for a fleet to change over. There's a lot to go through to get automation, level 4 and 5 style automation, which I'll explain shortly. It's not happening anytime soon, and there's just a massive amount of death and serious injury to occur until some point way off in the future where we completely eliminated humans who we know are making all the mistakes out of the decision making. But for the interim, we know that more safety features into the vehicles. We're getting a lot of passive safety coming through really nicely. Funnily enough, our mechanical engineering colleagues with the vehicles were so far advanced compared to us civil engineering people in terms of thinking about energy management in crashes and trying to not just stop crashes happening, but actually think about energy management within those crashes, like airbags, seatbelts, crumple zones. Like they were onto, like, you got to manage energy in these crashes. We've sort of been slow in the uptake, and hopefully we're changing a lot in that space. But we know that the vehicle safety features are getting better, but we know that there's big limitations. Just from a pure physics and biomechanics perspective, it's very hard to manage energy. So this is the ANCAP, which is the star rating cars, as many of you know. This is the side impact pole test. So they do a series of tests. So this is, the dummy has to not be exposed to forces that are above like a level 3 serious injury. So an acquired brain injury, they're going to hold this for life or worse. What speed do you think that they do this crash at? And you 5 stars if you can make sure that those forces aren't exerted. Have a guess, put it into the chat. I'll give a prize out for the person who's closest. What speed do they slide that vehicle in and this side impact pole test for an ANCAP crash test? Okay, so we've got 60, 45, 30. Belinda can have it first in with 30. It actually went from 29 kilometers an hour to 32 kilometers per hour very recently. And like that just shows you the limitations that we have, okay, in the side structure of vehicles and the forces. So, yeah. Again, your 5-star vehicle, you can't guarantee anything above that. Pretty exciting evolutions coming on now with the fact that outside vehicle occupants are also considered in the crash testing. So we expect airbags to pop out of bonnets and police bonnets to pop up. So there's cushioning, and certainly we see some good innovation in the vehicle design space for protecting of pedestrian, cyclists, and motorcyclists as well. So that's exciting. As I mentioned, though, like when do we see this vehicle which doesn't have a steering wheel because it's doing all the driving itself? Well, it's not as sort of like one day we're going to have all of these. They'll transition in slowly. You probably see some of them pottering around a waterside or something as a demonstration. And what we'll see is these levels of autonomy integrating in. There are 5 sort of internationally established major levels of autonomy, and there's like sub-levels within that. But we do have autonomy in a lot of the vehicles that are currently out there, where they have features that the vehicle is doing. This is a long time away. So we cannot just sit on our hands and say, vehicles will solve our issues. It's a long, long time away. Once we finally get them that we're all confident with, it's about changing over a whole fleet into them and acceptance of it and how it all plays out. It's very interesting. But what we see is vehicles like starting to take over in situations as well. I'll give you the illusion that you're in control of the vehicle. They let you pretend you're driving, but if the vehicle wants to take over in emergency situations, it does, which is a good way that we sort of integrate stuff in. And the vehicles will brake when they know an incident is happening, and lessen the severity, like we saw there with the dummy's legs come off. But that's that vehicle braked significantly, slowed down, and we saw a more minor hit. We wouldn't we'd like not to hit, but we reduce the energy. Let me cover off speed. I'll give you some basics of speed and speed management because it's pretty important. First basic of speed and speed management is that travel speed and impact energy are not a linear relationship. Travel speed and impact speed aren't even a linear relationship. So how do I explain that? Okay. If a vehicle is traveling along at 60 kilometers per hour and somebody steps out at 45 meters, the green they see it, they react, then they start braking as a red. And at 45 meters at 60 kilometers an hour, they will that's right on the point that they'll just touch it. Let's go up 10 kilometers an hour only, 70. We see that they would hit at 46 kilometers an hour, not just 10 kilometers an hour. So that's showing it's not linear. Then when we overlay on that the injury severity curves at different increases in speed, we see this highly powerful relationship. There's in fact a 4th power relationship between speed changes and fatalities. That's a 4th power relationship if you remember your high school maths, and a 3rd power relationship for serious injury. So what it's saying is very small changes in travel speed can result in pretty big changes in our most severe injury, in our severe injuries occurring. And we can influence that with speed limits or other infrastructure techniques to manage speed. But it's a very controversial one, and some of you are very well aware of how challenging speed limits can be. The public aren't convinced that lowering speed limits would reduce crashes on the road, despite an absolute mountain of worldwide evidence that it does. So we're still getting half the population not believing that, which is a big challenge for us to face. Interestingly, asking would lowering speed limits would reduce the severity of an injury when a crash occurs, most people generally believe that. And I was updating the Austroads Guide to Road Safety Part 3, which is speed and speed management. I chucked this diagram in just as it's a European diagram, but I thought it's kind of relevant because realistically, you can take whatever vehicles you have in your fleet, whatever road and roadside environment you have, and whatever road users you've got. As long as you filter it through an appropriate speed, you get a safe transport system. Like that's the one that we can, use as the filter. Now, huge practical challenges with that, but I think it's important to understand that sort of way of thinking. It also helps in things like, I would say a racetrack is a very safe system aligned car racing track, safe system aligned area, because we have a very high level of safety in the vehicles. The road environment is set up for crashes and managing energy, and we have road users who are doing a pretty good job. When crashes to occur, the majority of them people walk away from, and they're happening at very high speeds as well. But once you've got that set up, you can have higher speeds. Speed limits, just a couple of things to point out. I mean, you can achieve safe speeds through infrastructure and or speed limits, and you get big advantages if you're able to use infrastructure to influence speed rather than speed limits, just because of the lack of political sort of pushback often. Explaining why a speed limit is in place can assist with acceptance from the community a lot of the time. And protection of vulnerable road users is generally well accepted, be that traditional vulnerable road users, being pedestrians, cyclists, motorcyclists, but also like vulnerable in the sense of children or the elderly or those sort of things as well. And really, I think technology, again, is proving a nice way for us to get more appropriate speeds onto the network in a targeted manner. So variable speed limits, so areas of high activity and the speed limit changing during parts of the day. Intersections where speed limits are reduced as vehicles are approaching from the side roads to manage that time of risk, and then they go up again at other times. Those sorts of things are starting to become more and more popular as a way to do that. Again, in the written notes, you can download some key points there. Last little bit before I show you into the learning management system and give you your tasks. Anybody know a formula for risk? Anybody got a formula for risk they want to type into the chat? Risk equals something times something. Nobody wants to. Oh, here we go. Here they come. David is on it. David was first in there, I think, with likelihood times severity. We'll take that. Likelihood times consequence, or likelihood times severity, or probability times severity, probability times consequence, any of those. So what's the chance a bad thing is going to happen? And then what's the magnitude of badness? So it's, financial risk, environmental risk, health risk, it's all the same. What's the chance of recession multiplied by how deep a recession? That's the risk of recession. But we use this in road safety. What's the chance of a crash? And how bad is the crash going to be? In a safe system assessment, we've just done a little bit of a little tricky thing here. We've taken likelihood and we've extracted exposure out and said, how many people are exposed to a crash? Be that people walking or people riding or people in vehicles. What's the chance of the crash associated with the infrastructure that is there in the road environment that we have? And then how bad is it going to be when it does happen? And so essentially what a safe system assessment is us analysing these three elements in a lot of detail and quantifying them and then looking for ways for us to address this risk through these elements with the lens of safe system principles over it. So let me give you a couple of examples here, like exposure. Like, what are things that would influence the exposure to crashes on our road network? Well, the number of vehicles out there would do it. But here, it's a bit hard to see on a railway level crossing, and they've closed it with a mound of dirt and a road closed sign. I mean, vehicles are no longer exposed to that crash. So road users are not exposed to the crash because nobody's going across at this crossing point. Likewise, if we can, fully separate these users, so we can say vehicles up here, cyclists and pedestrians down here, we've eliminated the exposure to vehicle to pedestrian or vehicle to cyclist crashes. Okay, we might have cyclist to pedestrian crashes, so we can work through that, but that has been eliminated. We are not exposed to that other vehicle to vulnerable road user crash. Likelihood is a whole lot of things that we've done for many, many years, such as sealed shoulders, good line marking, audio tactile, center line and edge line, lighting, delineation signs, pavement, geometric design, horizontal, vertical. These are all trying to stop crashes happening in the first place. And they're really important, and we want to continue to do that. And they're good things that are looked at in a safe system assessment. Even like traffic signals, I mean, they are reducing the chance of a crash. People are told clearly, this is your time to stop, or this is your time to go. All right? So they are effective in reducing the chance of a crash. But they're not doing anything when the crash occurs, because that comes back to some basics of biomechanics of injury and physics. And we see that the things that we can influence are the speed of vehicles, the angles of impact between vehicles, the protection that is worn or provided in terms of shells around people or protective equipment sometimes, or the separation or redirection of energy. So the energy of a vehicle leaving the road and they hit a barrier and they dissipate their energy along over distance, as opposed to hitting a tree or a culvert or a power pole. And then also, stopping vehicles crossing and hitting a vehicle coming the other way. So again, the energy of the crash is dissipated along this rather than that instantaneous exchange of energy. So what a safe system assessment does is it goes through this, it quantifies these things, it helps you recommend things either in projects or in existing roads that get us the biggest value in terms of this risk reduction, but also in acknowledging that we need to really address these three elements, not just one, which is often done. It's often only that one that's done. But we've forced people into that and thinking about exposure. Exposure is usually the hardest because, involves closing roads or stopping people, getting into areas often. But sometimes it's good. So that gets us to about where I wanted for today. I saw lots of good comments coming in. I really love that interaction. It's a good group. I just want to show you the learning management system and point you at what you're going to be doing. I'm just going to, okay, beautiful. Hopefully you can see that. Kez, tell me if you can see my screen, hopefully.
Yeah, that's just come up.
Thank you. So thanks to those who have already introduced themselves, said hello. That's always nice. And there's a little video there, 10-minute sort of overarching safe system if you're interested. This is where the resources will be housed. So you can go in there as a folder of resource documents, which we'll add to as we go along if there's things that come up. We've got some fact sheets and some course information in there. But you'll go into module 1 and you'll see the PDF of the presentation. There are some videos there, little videos of some ads and some that video I mentioned where the people involved in that crashed with the central median barrier, showing their take on that crash is in there. There's a Mythbusters episode in there, which is basic, a bit more about the physics of crashes and crashes, as I was talking about with those crash energies. So you can have a look at that. It's always a bit of fun watching Mythbusters on work time. But you've got the quiz that you've got to do. So this is what you are marked on. Okay, there's the only thing for module 1 that you're getting marked on. So you get in there, you attempt the quiz, and you've got 3 attempts at it. There's an admin style question first, which you just bring to. This one is, but then you've got multiple choice question. You've got some drop downs, and you finish your attempt. So remember, you've got 3 goes at it. You shouldn't find it too hard. You've had a little bit of practice. And that's just our assurance that you're getting your head around the fundamentals of a safe system. And then we'll move on to the sort of characteristics of a safe system, road environment, and the like. Yeah, so if you refresh your browser, module 1 will appear. So it was only just made live a little bit into the session. So log back in again or refresh your browser and it will appear, because it wasn't appearing just as yep. So when you go in there, if you don't have access to the learning management system, get in contact with myself or training or whoever sent you an email. Kez, have we missed anything?
No, I don't think so. That's great. Just to reiterate, the training inbox, if you need any help, one-to-one session, and it's 80% on those quizzes. So
yeah, that's right. 80%, 80% pass mark. Log in a little bit early next time, and your chance to win a prize in our warm-up trivia. Trent's asked a question. Could you give a quick overview of what the assessment will be? Well, you'll do a safe system assessment at the end of the course. That's your main assignment, and you've got some other little assignments along the way. So when do you need to complete the quiz? Well, the reality is you need to complete the quiz before the end of the whole course, but we suggest you get onto it. It should only take you 5 minutes. And we suggest you get onto it fairly quickly, but yeah, the reality is you've got to have completed all these things before you will pass the course. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you a little bit early before our next session. Thanks, Kez.
thanks, Kev.
And you will be the wombats in the quiz. Bye.
Bye.